is Curran, Butler, Scanlon, Chambers and O'Keefe. How long have I got, Cian Curran?
20 minutes between us.
20 minutes after, yeah, all right. I listened in great amazement to the contribution of the Minister. I mean, if you just look at the second page of her speech, I mean, nobody believes that unemployment in this country dropped from 16% in 2015 to 5% now because of JobPath. I mean, you know, it's beyond belief that the Minister should come in here and make such a claim, or attempt to make such a claim. I've always had instinctive reservations about the idea of the private sector being involved in job activation on behalf of the state, because obviously there's a conflict. There's a conflict between the company providing the service, whose main objective is to make profit, and the needs of the individual who they're supposed to serve. Naturally, the profit motive takes precedence. And this is a situation, labour activation, where the individual, particularly people who have been long-term unemployed, should be front and centre. Front and centre. Now, anybody who studies the operation of how JobPath has functioned in this country for the past number of years will readily be able to conclude that the rigid model simply isn't working. The pay-by-results rigid model, one-size-fits-all, is not working. The profit motive predominates, and as a result, countless people have been forced under threat of sanction, into jobs that are unsuitable, low-skilled, no-skilled, and utterly inappropriate. In the vast majority of cases, very low-paid. Now, the Irish model, I'm told, is based on what we've introduced here is based on the Australian model. But the difference, of course, is that in Australia, the authorities, the government, the relevant department has taken great pains to ensure that the scheme is monitored and that people are protected against abuse. There is no such monitoring system here. In fact, I'm now informed that JobPath are subcontracting out some of the work. Subcontracting. Now, the arrival of JobPath and the Irish labour activation scene has been accompanied by something that's relatively new to the social welfare system, sanctions. An explosion of sanctions from 359 back in 2015 to 11,000, almost 11,200 in 2018. Over 55,000 people have been sanctioned since the arrival of JobPath. In evidence given to the Social Protection Committee recently, Dr. Tom Boland of Waterford Institute of Technology pointed out that those sanctions were there already, but that they have become much more oppressive and much more punitive with the arrival of JobPath. And we have the totally unacceptable situation that when one of the JobPath companies recommends somebody for sanction, the department acts as a rubber stamp. They don't investigate the matter at all. So, you know, we have two private companies here now, you know, earning money, getting loads of money from the taxpayer, who effectively have the power to sanction our citizens and deprive them of their social welfare and reduce their social welfare without the slightest intervention by the department. And that's not acceptable. That is simply not acceptable. Now, all this has been done, unfortunately, Minister, at the expense of services that were very properly provided by the state. I noticed that you say in your speech that unemployment was so high back in 2015 that we needed extra resources. Well, you know, the community employment schemes, TOOS, Rural Social Scheme, the LES, they were the resources which the state had. And the obvious answer was to invest properly in those resources. And if you did, Minister, you'd have got a much better result, much cheaper for the taxpayer. Because, you know, I think it's 29% of people who go through the LES system are employed after a 12-month period. In the case of JobPath, it's what? 9%. 9% get employment that lasts more than a year. With all this money being spent on behalf of the taxpayers, all this taxpayers' money being spent on this system, going into the pockets of private operators. Now, you know, sure, I mean, the uplift in the economy alone would have guaranteed that at least that 9%, if not more, would actually have got jobs anyway. So what function exactly has JobsPath performed over the past 4 or 5 years? It's ironic, Minister, that the Indicon report, which was commissioned by your own department to tell you what to do now that we're in a much better situation in the labour market, recommended 2 things in relation to the LES. They recommended that the LES should now, because of the massive drop in unemployment, that it should concentrate on the long-term unemployed. Well, wasn't that what JobsPath was set up to do? Concentrate on the long-term unemployed. I don't think this country can afford now to have 2 agencies, one public and one private, concentrating on that particular sector of the unemployed. JobsPath can do the job perfectly well. It also, the Indicon report also suggests that, with the drop in unemployment, that the resources being made available by the state to the LES should be reduced. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that, incidentally, because there are many, many people. Unemployment has dropped, yes, but underemployment is still quite considerable in this country. Many people are in precarious, uncertain jobs. Many people are not employed to their full capacity, at their full ability, and many people want to upskill. I mean, upskilling, Minister, should be a fundamental part of labour activation. We have the opposite here. We have downskilling, or de-skilling, if you like, where people are actually trapped in these low-paid, low-skilled jobs and have to go in there on pain of sanction. So, I think we should continue to invest in the LES. I think they still have a considerable job of work to do, particularly for people on the margins. But it would be perverse, Minister, perverse in the extreme, if we were to reduce the resources available to the LES in order to keep these 2 private companies in operation. I find that utterly unacceptable. Now, you will know, Minister, that there was an amendment, or there was a proposal, a similar motion to the one here tonight, put down in the Senate recently, and we sought to amend it. And we sought to amend it by asking the government to do certain things to improve the operation of JobsPath. We did that in an attempt to be reasonable. But apart from one change, namely the right of somebody on JobsPath to apply for a CE scheme, if such was available, nothing else has been done. Nothing else has been done, and meanwhile, the racket continues. So, I think, quite honestly, having thought this through, and, I heard the correspondence that Deputy Buckley read out there, I could plaster the room with messages like that from all over the country, which I'm getting on a constant basis, and they can't be all wrong. So, I think now it's time to focus on the resources available to the state. Let them concentrate on the long-term unemployed. Let them concentrate on getting people out of precarious employment into better type employment. Let them concentrate on upskilling. So I think it's time at this particular stage to give this particular scheme a decent burial. So we will be supporting the motion.